Hey there! In this tutorial I'm going to be talking about if statements, else statements, and else if statements, and these are fundamental components of programming. You're going to find these kinds of statements in all kinds of programming languages, and I'm going to be going over them in C. And I'm doing this tutorial for those people who downloaded my personalized finance app programming guide, and it's a guide that teaches you, if you haven't downloaded it yet, it's a guide that teaches you how to take your credit card transactions and then categorize them into different budget categories so you know how much you're spending. And it's a fun project, and it will really help you learn some fundamental programming concepts. You can download it in the link in the description. Alright, we're going to be doing this tutorial in Visual Studio Code like I always do. And if you don't know how to set that up, you can watch my first video, How to Start Coding Now for Beginners. So first we're going to create a file. Let's name it if-else.c. And then I'm going to do the #include. I'm going to include the standard library. This is just the standard input-output header file, and it has some basic functions that most programs will use. So we include that, and then we're going to make our main function, then printf, and then we'll start with our typical hello world print. And then we're going to return 0 because our main function is of type int, so we have to return an int. Alright, let's run that. Okay, there you go. It says hello world. I don't like how it's colliding with this text, so let's put a divider. Alright, good. Actually, I want more of a divider. And I also want to put this afterwards too, so it's more clear where our program starts and begins. Alright. Okay, that looks better. Alright, now let's put in our if statement. We'll put it in between the hello world and the end, the divider at the bottom. So first, to give you some intuition about if statements, let's create a variable, and we'll use number of dogs like I always do. Number of dogs is 5, and then we check number of dogs is equals to 5, and then we're going to printf the number of dogs is, and then we use %d for the int. And if you're confused about what I'm doing here with the printf statements, you can watch my previous video about how to display data and information. Alright, great. So the number of dogs is 5. Now if we change this number to 4, then let's run it, see what happens. Okay, we don't see that print statement. We don't see the statement anymore. And that's because we are not entering into this if statement. This if statement is checking if the number of dogs is equal to 5. But right now I set it to 4. And this is called an assignment. And I think it can be kind of confusing because when I was first starting to code, I was wondering if doing this will set the number of dogs to 5. But this is actually a condition. So there's a difference. Assignment is you're making this variable number of dogs to be a certain number, which is 4. And then a condition is when you're checking what is the value. You're checking if number of dogs is equals to 5. And you can actually reverse this. You can actually check if 5 is equal to the number of dogs. If it makes it simpler for you, you could actually do something like this, so that you're not confused between the assignment and the condition. So let's run that. So it didn't work, but if we do 5, and then we do that, now it works because we're checking the number of dogs. What's the value? Does it actually equal 5? So this is a condition where the computer is checking the value, and the assignment is assigning the value. Alright, actually a more proper term is checking the condition. So that's how you might use this in your program. But I personally like, some people will debate about this, but I personally like doing it, checking the condition like this, checking if number of dogs is equal to 5 like this. I like doing this better because it's more intuitive. So that's the if statement. Now we can learn about the else statement. The else statement looks like this. And basically what happens is we will, if this is not true, if this condition is not true, this is called the condition. If this condition is not true, then we'll enter into this one. And we'll say the number of dogs is not 5. The number of dogs, let's change this to 5, because we would only enter this condition if number of dogs is equal to 5. So we don't need to do this anymore. Okay, let's try this. All right, it says the number of dogs is 5, so that means we're hitting this we're going into this if statement. But if I change this number to 4 and then I run this, it's not going to go into this if statement, it's going to go into this else statement instead. All right, now it's saying the number of dogs is not 5, so that's why it's going into the else. So the else is just telling the computer that I want to run this block of code if this condition is not true. And you can also do other things, like you can say if the number of dogs is greater than 5, and the number of dogs is greater than 5, and then number of dogs is not greater than 5. So now it's 4, right? So it should enter into this condition. All right, the number of dogs is not greater than 5, and that's because we set it to 4. So now let's make it 6. Say the number of dogs is 6. So I'll run that. And now the number of dogs greater than 5, I should say, is greater than 5. All right, so that's if and then else. Now the else if statement is when you want to check something else, something in particular. So if else if you say number of dogs, let's say it's 6, then we're putting in another condition here. Let's set this one equal to 5. Let's make this one equal 5. So then the number of dogs is 5. And then in this condition, the number of dogs is 6. So in the else if condition, we're checking if it's not this one, else let's check this one. Let's check if this condition is true or not. And if this condition is not true, then we'll go into the else condition. So if it's 5, we'll enter in this one. If it's 6, we'll enter into this one. And if it's not 5 or 6, we'll enter the else condition. So let's set this equal to 1. And if number of dogs is 1, it's not gonna equal 5. This condition will be false. So we're gonna go into this condition, and then it's gonna be false again, and then it's gonna go into this condition. So let's see what happens. Okay, the number of dogs is not 5 or 6, but say we make it 5. Now it's gonna go in here, it's gonna enter this condition. So we run this, and we get 5. Now if we change it to 6, it's gonna enter this condition first, and it's gonna be false. And then it's gonna go here, check if it's 6, and then it's gonna go in here, and then it's gonna print that it's 6. Okay, so that's if, else if, and else. Okay, say we want to ask the user how many dogs there are. We can do printf and say how many dogs are there. And then we can do a scanf to read that in. I also have a tutorial on this too if you don't understand what's going on. How many dogs are there? And then the user will put in the number of dogs, and then we'll go into this if statement. Alright, so we're gonna ask the user how many dogs there are, and then they're gonna put in the number, and it'll be stored into number of dogs, and then we'll check the value. So at this point, we don't need to assign the value here. We can just leave it unassigned. Or maybe we can initialize it to 0. So how many dogs are there? There is 5. Okay, so the number of dogs is 5. Let's run it again. Let's put in 6. Now the number of dogs is 6. Or maybe we put in 3 or 7. And it says the number of dogs is not 5 or 6. So are you starting to see the value of using if statements and else if statements? All right, I want to do another example, but without the int. So let's try using characters. Let's do a char. And instead of doing number of dogs, we'll say it's first initial, and then we'll assign it a space for now. And let's remove this first. Now we can check on first initial. My first initial is H. My last initial is M. Okay, here we can check the value of the character. Let me check if it's a H, if it's letter H, or we check if it's letter M. So right now I'm assigning it to a space character, so it should enter this condition. Okay, your first initial is not H or M, but let's change it to H. Okay, your first initial is H, so it went into this condition. So it was saying, oh, the value that's assigned is H. And likewise, we can do it for M to go into this case. All right, so something to note is that for char, you have to use a single quote, but for string, you can use a double quote. All right, let's say we want to do a string, right? So instead of first initial, let's use first name, and then we'll make it my name, Henrik. And we have to make it an array because it's a string. String in C is an array of chars, characters. So let's make it like this. And when you're using string, you have to use double quotes. All right, now this looks like it's gonna work, but it's not, because you can't do this with strings in C. So instead of doing this, we have to use a function called strcmp, or string compare. So basically this one, it's gonna turn into this. And what this function does, strcmp, it's gonna take this array and this string, and it's gonna compare them. If they match character for character, then it's gonna return a 0. So we have to check is this function gonna return 0. So we have to use this whole thing in here, like that. And then same idea here. We have to do this, and we have to use M. I'm gonna comment that out, but I'm gonna leave it there just so you can have a reference to it. And before we can run this, we need to include the header. We need to include the library where this function comes from. It comes from the function string.h, and these are probably the two popular libraries you'll use in C. Two most popular ones. All right. So if this matches this, it's going to return a 0, and then it's going to enter into this if statement and then print my name. And then if it's M, it's going to go in this one. All right, your first name is Henrik. Now if I change this just a little bit to like Herrick and then run this, it's going to say it says your first initial. It runs into the else condition because it doesn't match Henrik and it doesn't match M. But if I match M, run that, then you get M. I'm gonna put it back to Henrik for now. There you go. That looks better. Let's make this else tutorial. All right. So just to recap, this is your condition. That's your condition that the if statement is going to check if it's true, or if it's 1, it's going to enter in here. and then if it's not true, it'll go into this case, and if it's not true, it's going to go into this case. And just to prove a point, if I say if it's 1, it's just going to go into here all the time because the condition is always 1. So let's run that. So it always enters your first name is Henrik. But if I put a 0 there, and then I make this one a 1, basically 0 means false and 1 is true. You can think of it that way. So if it's false, then you don't enter in the if statement, you don't enter in this case, and then you come here, and then I see the 1, so it's gonna come in here. So now you can see it went in there. But if we make it 0, run that. Now your first name is not Henrik Graham, because we checked this condition, it was 0, so don't enter these brackets, and then you go in here, check it's 0, and so we don't enter these brackets, so we must go into the else condition and run this line of code. So that's really what's going on underneath the hood. But if you're just starting out how to program, I would say don't worry about that for now. But if you're running your code and you run into something you don't expect, then that's some good background information to know. And I can make more tutorials about that at a later time. Okay, so I put my code changes in GitHub. If you ever want to play with it, you can git clone this, or you can look at the file here. So this is all the code that we used for our tutorial today. Alright, so that's if statements, else if statements, and how to use them with int, char, and string. And the same idea will happen for float and double as well. So I'll leave that to you to play around with. Alright, so that's it for this tutorial. If it really helped you with your program, let me know in the comments. And if you want me to make more tutorials like this, let me know. And I'll be sure to make more of this type of content for you. Alright, until next time, peace.